Hello and welcome to the lecture examples for management accounting applications, presented as always by Dr. Martin Roberts. If you look at the Word document, you have three very simple questions at the top. The first one is, what's the basic overhead absorption rate definition? And that's very simply budget production overheads divided by budget base. We've done it many times now. We've certainly done it at level 4, so hopefully this has now begun to stick. Okay. The next question is, which overheads can be included and which cannot by law? You must only include production costs, things like sales costs, administration costs. If they are not associated with production, then they cannot be included. So in terms of defining apportionments, is, like it says, linked to the questions, and also ABC, which stands for activity-based costing. Apportionment refers to the distribution of various overhead items in proportion to the department on a logical basis. In essence, it's about sharing costs across departments, and we'll do more of that in the second part of this lecture exercise. So moving down, first thing we're asked to do is we're asked to calculate a full unit cost, and what you've got is you've got a budget for product A, and you can see the selling price, the direct materials and the direct labour, with a note that it takes 3 hours to make 1 unit. Now our fixed production overhead here is 1,422,000, and our budgeted fixed costs are absorbed by budget production of 60,000 hours. Remember that we can use a budgeted base of units, labour hours, or machine hours. They're probably the three most common bases of absorption. So let's move on and very quickly do this. So in terms of the answer, the only thing we really need to calculate is the overhead absorption rate based on what you'll see in your textbooks as a traditional basis. It's incredibly straightforward and is incredibly simple, and it allows, because we're using labour hours, it allows overhead absorption rate to be attributable to your products, not as a flat rate, but in relation to how long it takes your workforce to make the item. So if it takes your workforce longer to make the item, then therefore you would include more cost in your overhead absorption rate. So very simply, we do 1,422,000 divided by 60,000 hours, and we end up with £23.70 as our overhead absorption rate. If we add all that together, so your direct materials plus your direct labour plus your overhead absorption rate, which now stands at £71.10, that will give us a total cost of £211.10, and that would be what I would expect to see as the answer to the question set. Now I've done a little bit more than that so that you can see for completeness how it all comes together. Like I said earlier, what you've got to remember is that you've calculated your overhead absorption rate for just 1 hour of production. So if this unit takes 3 hours, then we must obviously multiply it by 3. If it takes 2, you would multiply by 2. If it was by 10, multiply by 10, and so on. So what you've got in front of you is, let's just go through it, is £300 was your selling price, minus your materials, minus your labour, minus your overhead absorption rate, will give you a gross profit of £88.90, and then that would give you a margin of 29.6%. And what that is is you calculate that by taking your gross profit and you divide it by your selling price. So that 88.9 divided by 300 will give you 29.6%. In essence, what that's saying to you is for every pound that you sell, you're making close to 30 pence. So let's move on. Our next one is something again that you should have done in level 4, but you need to see how we do it in an old-fashioned way before you then move on and look at activity-based costing. So allocation, apportionment, all that really means is sharing your costs across the factory. What we normally have is we have a problem is that, let's take say utilities that you see in the question there, is that will be presented as one bill. If we don't have meter readings at every stage of our factory, then we cannot accurately allocate the cost to the different departments in the factory. So what you have to do is find a basis of apportionment, a way of sharing those costs to those 3 departments. So I always use the idea of a student house. If you had a set of bills to share out, how would you do it? Well, if there was 3 of you, you would share it amongst the 3 equally. However, it doesn't work like that in manufacturing, and to be honest with you, unless your rooms are all the same size and you all spend the same amount of time in the house that you share, then actually that isn't fair. However, if you were then suddenly to time how long your fellow students were in the house and how big their rooms were in comparison to yours, you would, and then split the bills in accordance to that proportion, then you would not have many friends come the end of your academic year. You would make a great accountant, but your level of friends would decrease rapidly. So let's go and look at this seriously. So what we've got is that if we remember we had fixed production costs of 1,422,000. We now have just over 1.2 million. That's we can readily allocate. No problems. We know where that goes. We know who the bills belong to. Now we've got 3 sections in the factory, and that's the raw material section, the manufacturing section, and the finished goods section. And what we've got a problem with is we've got a problem in that we've got utilities and we've got maintenance. They've come in as one invoice, one bill, and we don't know how to share that across. We don't have anything at the moment that says, yes, raw materials have used all this cost. So all we can do is make an estimate as to what levels of cost have been used by each department. And we need to find a method of allocation and apportionment to share the costs, in essence. So what we've got is we've got a couple of pieces of information that we can use. So what we've got is we've got area occupied, which is measured in square footage, and then we've got machines that are measured by number of. Okay, so let's move on. So to do it quite easily is utilities. We just look at the area occupied. That's a fantastic basis to share the costs out on. So what we've got is that for the raw materials section, we've got 10 square feet for that area. The main body of manufacturing has 35 square feet, and finally the finished goods section has only 5 square feet. So what we do is we add the 3 together. The 10 plus the 35 plus the 5 gives us 50 square feet in which all the factory operates. So what we do now is we just find a method of sharing that cost across. So we know the total cost is 150,000. We can work out the cost per square foot. So we just do the 150,000 1000 divided by 50 will give us 3000 per square foot, and then we multiply that by 10 to give us the 30,000, the 3000 times the 35 to give us the 105,000, and finally the 5 times the 3000 will give us £15,000. So there you go. As a check, if you add it back, is that you've allocated 150,000. Now, there is another way of doing it, and some students always pull me up on this. They would rather create a direct percentage. So what they do is they take the 10, they divide it by 50, and they times by 150,000, so that you get the same result. So likewise, you would take the 35, you would divide it by 50, and you would times it by the 150,000. Again, getting the same level of apportionment. And we do finally the same. 5 divided by 50 times by 150,000 will give us the 15,000 that you see. Okay, so there you go. Although you see the 150 twice, it's just choosing one method or the other in which to apportion that cost across the three departments. So that's for utilities. Let's now go and look at the maintenance of machines. And so therefore I've given it away already, really, is that what's the best way of sharing the cost across the three departments is really to use the number of machines. As it says, there's no right or wrong answer to this. It's just the more logical basis from which you've chosen. So if an auditor came to you and said, is this the best way of allocating costs? The answer is yes, because it's the most logical, or it seems the most logical. If you need a machine, you will need it maintained. And the more you have, probably the greater your cost is going to be. There might be some argument over age, etc., but this is a very sensible and logical way of doing things. So again, you just choose the method that you like best to share that cost out. Okay, so you can either add the machines up so that we have 20 machines in total, and then we divide the 50,000 by the 20 to give us the cost per machine, how much on average it will cost to maintain. So raw materials is one machine, and that would take 2,500 charge. The main manufacturing section has 10 machines, so again that becomes 25,000, and finally the last department of the factory, the finished goods, is you just take the 50,000, you divide it by 20 to give us 2,500, and then you would multiply it by 9 to give you the 22,500. Again, just to check that you've done it right, you add the three totals together, and yes, it does add back to 50,000. Again, you can do it the other way. So you decide to do it more on a percentage terms. So you take the 1, you divide it by 20, you multiply it by 50,000, and there you go, you've got the same answer. You've got 2,500. The next one, you would do 10 divided by 20 times 50. Well, there you go, it's a half, not particularly difficult. And then 9 divided by 20 times the 50 gives us 22,500. Okay, and again, just add them all up and you've got 50,000. Excellent. So what happens next is you just put it back in the overall chart, and there you see is the 1,442,000, or the 1.4 million, has now been allocated across the three departments within the factory, within raw materials, manufacturing and finished goods. And you've got to double check many ways. So you've got the total cost for raw materials, the total cost for manufacturing, the total cost for finished goods, and then you've got the total cost for the whole factory, all allocated across the three departments. So I'm going to leave it there. Very simple. Take your time, understand it, and this following week's seminar questions will all be about apportionment and allocation. Okay, enjoy, and hopefully I'll see you soon.